Woohoo! We are indeed live on another Wednesday afternoon for me, and I believe for Katy too. She'll confirm in a minute. As you can see, I am joined today by Katy Code Stuff, which is very exciting. Katy is a software engineer who became a team lead just a few years into her tech career. Very impressive, and that is why I've invited her to join the stream, because she's here to share a wealth of knowledge with you about how to supercharge your web development journey. Some topics I've thought of to discuss with Katy are skills for your career advancement, how to find a role which will let you grow, career hacks, how to know what to learn next, making connections, being awesome in interviews, all of that good stuff. However, you may have topics of your own you want to ask Katy, which is why we do these streams live. So feel free to drop your questions into the chat, and I will do my best to ask as many as I can. But first, let's welcome Katy. Yay! Thanks for coming, Katy. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Alex is here. Alex knows Katy from a Twitter space we did a little while ago, which is where I met Katy. Thank you for dropping on by, Alex. And Debjit is hitting us with those tigers. Yes, if you don't know what this means, we have a tradition here at Scrimba, which started on the live streams and it's slowly expanding to other live events. And if you are new here, put a bunny rabbit into the chat. If you've been before, hit me with that tiger just like Debjit. Yes, brilliant stuff. Thank you all for coming along. And thank you to all of those of you who are watching in the future, because not everybody watches this live. So, yes. Hello, future viewers. First off, Katy, shall we start a little bit with your background and what your transition into tech actually looked like and how you managed it?
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter, Katy Code Stuff, and I talk about quite a lot there about sort of my journey into tech. But it started sort of after university. So I originally did a physics degree at the University of Nottingham, and then decided that actually physics wasn't for me. I had to find something else to do. So yeah, that was pretty much it. I didn't really put much more thought into it than that, and I feel very lucky that I managed to sort of end up in a career that I enjoy so much. But yeah, there's some bits of physics which have software engineering in, but it's very I don't know, science based, more about like generating graphs and doing maths and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been a journey. I've been quite sort of lucky. I managed to get a position, a graduate position, where I was trained on the job. So that's kind of where it all started for me. And that was 5 years ago or so.
Brilliant stuff. Looking forward to hearing a bit more about that as we progress through the stream. Woo! Abishkek has an interesting comment. I always have an issue learning new things. So now I've started learning React, but I'm stuck in tutorial hell, a feeling many of us are familiar with. I don't know how to get out of it. Any tips for that, Katy? Have you experienced tutorial hell? And if so, what did you do about it?
I feel like it's so easy to get sucked into just looking at tutorial after tutorial. But definitely my advice is obviously, find something like a beginner tutorial in React for this example, and it's a great way to get started. But I would pretty much just say jump in straight away and trying to create something. I actually recently started with React myself. I can't remember when I started now, but probably at the beginning of the year. And I just decided I want to learn a bit of React and I want to have a website. So why not use that to, as an opportunity to learn React? So that's kind of what I did. Obviously, there's aspects of bits that I had to go to tutorials for, but I just kind of, when I needed to know the next bit, that's when I looked for the information rather than just reading and reading and reading before just getting started.
Yeah, so building as a way of learning, basically. Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you for the question there, Avishkek, and best of luck with leaving tutorial hell. Yes. Oh, interesting question from Nagendra. Katy, do you have a tech YouTube channel?
No, I don't. Would you like to see one? As you can see, my setup's not very good, so I definitely would have to upgrade if that was something that I was going to do. But yeah, at the moment, I'm pretty much solely on Twitter. I am on LinkedIn, but that I sort of use as just a glorified online CV. And Hashnode, I'm using that for sort of my longer blog posts, article type things.
Yeah, watch this space. So let's talk a bit then about your first steps into tech, I suppose. You mentioned you had a role where you could learn on the job, which sounds great. Perhaps you'd like to tell us about that and what skills you needed to get that job, if indeed any. Some people get jobs that really start from the ground up. What did it look like for you?
So, as I mentioned, I graduated with a degree, so that makes me a graduate. So I was looking for graduate schemes. So this is something that you do have to be a graduate to be eligible for. I'm based in the UK, and there's loads of graduate schemes which are targeted for uni leavers. So that's where I started looking. And in terms of software development, because they accept people from not necessarily just a computer science background, that's kind of where I had my in. Physics is a STEM background, so obviously it's linked to computer science. I'd say pretty much every graduate scheme for a software development would expect it to be within a STEM subject. Obviously, there's other ways to get into it that lots of people take, the sort of self-taught route, but that was my route. So as with the different graduate schemes that were available, there was some which expected more knowledge beforehand than others, but then some which didn't really expect much at all, and it was more about the potential. So as a student, you do show that you've got sort of the drive to, problem solving skills, you stuck at something for 3 or 4 years. It shows the skills there, which maybe you don't have any workplace skills yet, but they know that they can teach you that once you're in the door. So that's what I aimed for. I had plenty of interviews for places where I did a sort of technical test, and it was very clear that I was not good enough. One, I remember I did like a load of Python. I can't remember what it was. This is years ago, but just a series of kind of Python challenges that were very maths based. And then I went into an interview which was for a Python role, and then they asked me to read something from a file. And I had literally no idea how to do that because I'd been focusing on this sort of mathsy side of Python, like how to do sums, how to do all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so for that one, I bombed it. Oh, I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Who are you?
Okay, that's not. Oh, I feel like I'm gonna have all the technical challenges this hour. I'm sorry. But yeah, and then I did a couple of different interviews and stuff, and each one that I failed, I had things to improve on for next time. So it meant that when I did eventually get the role that I did, I had been able to sort of hone the right skills.
Yes, perfect. Sorry if there is some background noise, Santiago. I don't hear it, which is odd, but hopefully it will go away soon. That's all I can say. Yeah, on that tale of Python problems, let's say, Abed has an interesting question which says, how do you overcome the overwhelming feeling when you first look at an existing project that you have to work on? I know that feeling well. It's horrible. Any tips for dealing with that?
Gosh, it's a great question, and it's something that I think a lot of people, when they're getting into software development, they don't really consider. But when you go into a company with, they'll usually have an existing product that you have to work on. That's literally what you have to do. You have to come in, be able to work out how it works, all of the tech debt that it's accumulated over the years, all of its quirks. You'll have some people who will know it inside out, the experts, and then you'll have other people that just know different little bits of it. And I'm afraid that's just how it is working on a big product in a company that's been around for multiple years. Obviously, it is overwhelming. I moved jobs about just over a year ago now, and I went from a product that I knew inside out and was really comfortable with onto a new product in a completely different industry that I didn't know anything about, and it was imposter syndrome. It was, even for me, I was just like, oh man, what have I done? Why have I done this? So what would my advice be? I think just get the basics down. So how do you run it? Can you get it running on your machine locally? Do you understand sort of what the settings do? Things like that. Once you've got to that basic knowledge, basic level, then you want to start picking up tickets. So if you're obviously in a company environment, you'll usually have some sort of like ticketing system, and you might hopefully get given a sort of basic one to work on and just start from there. No one's expecting you from day one to suddenly, in 1 week, understand the whole system and how it works. All you need to do is start in one place and just, go through your ticket, ask for help, reach out to the experts, and just with time, you will just become comfortable and you'll touch more and more places in the product until you feel like it's not so much of a mystery, and actually parts that you haven't worked on before, you'll have the confidence that you could pick up anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent advice for that. You briefly touched on imposter syndrome, which, again, is something I think everyone really experiences in the tech industry, and I suspect
Definitely.
in other industries as well. Do you have any advice for someone who is dealing with imposter syndrome, or how can they deal with it?
Yeah, imposter syndrome sucks, but one of the good things about it is that they say is if you feel imposter syndrome, then that means that you're probably quite good. It usually tends to be the people who have they're not actually good, and they're sort of almost deluded in their greatness, and they'll go through life without imposter syndrome, but they're not, it's almost like an ignorance. So generally, if you are feeling imposter syndrome, I'd say that's a good thing. It shows that you're not ignorant, you're not arrogant about your skills. But yeah, I get imposter syndrome a lot. It just happens. The best thing to do is try and ignore it. Don't let it overshadow what you can do and your achievements, and definitely don't let it shadow opportunities for you. So if your manager gives you a great opportunity and you'd love to do it, but you're worried you're not good enough, just push that aside. Take the opportunity. They wouldn't have offered it to you if you weren't capable. So I know it's hard to, but it's sort of just like ignore it is my advice. And try as much, maybe like in your language, when you're talking to people, using that sort of unsure language, so saying I think or maybe, trying to just remove things like that from your speech. It can show a bit more confidence, and you'll come across more confident about something, even if inside you're feeling quite nervous or unsure.
Yeah, no, that is a very good tip. And I've found, because I've used that tip as well, I've also found that when you stop using words like I think and maybe, you, for some reason, feel more confident as well, because you're kind of telling yourself that you're not so sure if you're using phrases like that. So that is very nice advice. Yeah, good. Aaron is asking, how do you personally keep software development fun and interesting? Oh.
I think focus on the bits that you like. It can be really dull and boring. I know lots of people, especially if they're trying to break into tech is so exciting, and maybe that's the same with every industry. But when you are sort of in the grind, obviously there's going to be boring days, there's going to be hard days. One thing that I've really enjoyed is being part of the Twitter community. Since I've joined, it kind of gives me, I don't know, a lot of inspiration. Like every day, people are posting inspirational stuff, and hopefully, I'm one of those people. And it kind of reignites the passion there. Sometimes, if you've had a long day and you're fed up, then you've got people who are really excited about something, and usually, other people's excitement is quite infectious. But yeah, I think there's no expectation, or at least I don't have any expectation, that people find all parts of software fun, because it's not. So you can be working on a bug for days or weeks, and it is absolutely soul destroying. But you just have to remember that there's other aspects of it that you do like, and maybe one way you can sort of have like a side project going on that you're doing sort of for fun, or I don't know, maybe it's just talking about it with your colleagues or your friends, and just sort of reminding each other of the highlights a little bit.
Yeah, excellent. And on that, here, one moment, is Katy's Twitter. Yep, Katy Code Stuff link incoming into the chat. So definitely go and give Katy a follow. Perfect. Question here from Dominic Ross, which has caught my eye because it was along the lines of one which I wanted to ask anyway, which is, should you take a job in tech even if it's not in the field you actually want? For example, if you land a DevOps job, but you want to do front end, is it worth taking a job which wouldn't necessarily be your first or maybe second or third choice just to get a foot in the door or get the next step up? What's your take on that, Katy?
That is a very interesting question. So, from my experience, basically getting my job, I just wanted a job, and I wanted to be a software engineer, and that was kind of it. So I didn't specifically target an industry. I didn't even really know about the difference between front end and back end at that time. It was just, let's do programming. And I remember the job that I did eventually get, and I was there for a long time, and really loved. When I was reading the job spec, I was like, oh, do I want to do this? I'm not sure this is up my street. Will it be boring? But I took it anyway, and no regrets, because it was getting that foot in the door, which is often the hardest bit. That said, front end and like sort of back end DevOps role is quite separate. So potentially, if you really, really, really loved web development, and that's how you live and breathe web development, and you don't want to be doing infrastructure, which is sort of what DevOps is, they are quite sort of opposite sides of the coin. So maybe you'd want to find a role that's a little bit closer to web development, even more of a sort of full stack developer role. But overall, I would say the best thing to do if you're starting out is just get a role, and you might really love it. And you can always kind of, once you're in a role, take on opportunities or like grow your skills on your own time for a different part of it. And that's something that I did, because I started off as a back-end developer, and that's what I was for the first couple of years. And then I really sort of wanted to have a go at the front-end stuff. So I started learning Angular, and then asked to take on a few front-end tickets. And then I eventually got like a full stack role. So, once you're in the business, I assume that they would probably have a range of different roles. So maybe you could start in the DevOps team and work your way up to sort of front end role, as long as the company sort of did all of that, obviously, because there's plenty of companies that might not have like a UI necessarily, or the other way around.
Yeah, very good advice there. Thank you. Java Summit is wondering what your coding learning journey looked like. So on the role where you were learning on the job, what process did you use to retain all of that information? Yeah. Was it a case of you do things again and again and they kind of become second nature, or did you have notes, or what was your approach to that?
Definitely, I made a lot of notes, and I guess you have to. You're sort of studying for something, so the same way that you would study for something at school or at uni, making notes, reading about it. As it was for me in this role, I basically got given small projects to do that weren't really related to the product that the company did, but they were just more like teachable projects for myself to do, and just went through a couple of those, and then got more and more complex things given to me. Basically, it's different projects, different pieces of work, and that's the same way I sort of answered for someone's question earlier. I think the best way is to just get stuck in and do it. And if you hit problems, if you have questions, then ask the relevant person. But yeah, I think when you're working, as much as there was an element of study expected, they also wouldn't expect me to sort of be sat reading all day long. They want me to be doing stuff and getting tickets done, even if the tickets weren't related to wider business. It was still more about like getting me up to scratch as quickly as possible.
Perfect. Yeah, sounds very nice. I like this question from Space. I love front-end development, back-end development, and UI design, but I don't like talking to people. I don't like to participate in brainstorming and other idea-generating team sessions. What should I do? That is a very good question, Space. What sprung to my mind, I don't know if you'd agree with this, Katy, is perhaps freelancing would be a good way for Space to go, because then you can kind of work in your own pace and I guess have more freedom on the decisions you make about what work to take and how to do it, and less meetings, from what I understand. But yeah, what would you say to Space, Katy?
The question says at the end, like, what should I do? I mean, I'm not really sure like for what end, but yeah, freelancing is a great option. Obviously, you still have to talk to clients, you still have to get work. There's going to be an element of networking there, reaching out. If you're working in a software development team, like obviously you don't have to be part of these conversations, but you will find that will most likely limit the opportunities you're given and your career growth. So it might my advice would you just have to do it. But yeah, it's sort of yeah. Or maybe one thing that you could do is if there's like a feature that's coming up and you know that it's coming up. Oh, I'm getting that feedback again. I don't know if it's your microphone, because when you speak it seems to go away. Oh, it's gone now. Okay, so we carry on. So yeah, if there's a feature coming up and you know there's going to be a meeting about it, you could always prepare beforehand, make the notes and all the suggestions that you have, and give them to your manager separately. Or when the other people in the team are brainstorming, you could sort of quietly sit there taking notes, and then put your feedback after the meeting's finished. But I think ultimately the best thing to do is to try and get involved with the team sessions.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know how much brainstorming you've had to do so far, Space, but maybe it's a case of getting used to it and giving it a go, as Katy said there. So yes, best of luck to you. I wanted to talk a little bit about interviewing, because that's something that people often ask us about. Do you have any tips on how to approach interviews? Ideally, how to be awesome. But if not, how to survive them at least, because I think that's what most people want. Yeah. How do you approach an interview process?
Yeah, interviews suck. I think everybody knows that worldwide. You're nervous. I think one thing to remember is that often the person on the other side of the interview is nervous as well.
Yep.
I actually, the funny thing is, I've conducted more interviews than I have been the interviewee at this point. So I kind of have seen it from both sides of the table. And yeah, like I said, usually the person interviewing has also got some nerves and they're not sure what to say and they want to get on with you and stuff. So at the end of the day, is you're two people or maybe a couple of people having a conversation, and it's best to sort of, I think, try and remember that and be as normal as possible and friendly. But yeah, I think, yeah, for the interview, my tips would be probably the same tips that you get on Google, which is, prepare beforehand. Make sure anything that's on your CV you can talk about. I think if there's stuff on your CV that if you were asked a question about, you wouldn't be able to answer, I would take it off your CV. There's definitely a temptation with software developers to have a CV which is basically like a whole page of all the technologies you've ever seen. I think it's better to bring that down into a much smaller list, maybe of like 10 or 15 things, maybe even fewer. But there's 10 or 15 sort of things that you know really well, you could talk about, because the interviewer will be most likely looking at your CV and using that to find inspiration to ask you questions. So definitely prepare and revise your own CV. And then when you are asked questions about things that are on your CV, go into not just what you did, but also what you got out of it. I think this is especially important when you're starting off and you don't necessarily have a lot of industry experience. But any role that you've had, how can you apply the skills that you developed there to this role that you're interviewing for? So say you were like working in a bar, you have to have good timekeeping, you have to be organized, maybe you're a supervisor, so you can talk about how you had a team of people that you were managing. Anything that you can do to sort of really apply to the role that you're applying for is gonna do well. So even if you don't have a lot of experience, try and draw what you can from what you have got.
Yeah, that is very good advice. We have a lot of career switchers on Scrimba, and we always say, don't think you're starting from zero, because you're not. Because as Katy just said, anything you've done in the past definitely translate itself into tech. Abed is asking, as an interviewer, what are the skills that you personally look for in a candidate?
The skills, well, obviously it depends what the job is. But for like a generic software developer interview, obviously whatever's on the job spec, you'd expect to see related things. Looking for somebody who knows a coding language well, who's touched a few different tech stacks, but it really depends, because obviously, say you're hiring for a junior role, then you won't expect them to have necessarily the best background or all the skills. But technically, at least show an interest in so say they don't have like a lot of programming experience, but they're applying for a role that uses C#, which is what I work in, then I'd expect them to have at least shown an interest in like looking at what it is and knowing a little bit about it and having some basic skill set there. So for a junior role, obviously as you go up through mid-level and senior and beyond, you'd expect higher tech skills. But generally, I say in a face-to-face interview, you don't go into the technical stuff too much. This is just my experience. Obviously, I can't speak for all interviews everywhere and all interviewers, but you tend to talk more about sort of the projects you've worked on, and more like generically about you and what you enjoy and stuff. And then it's in the technical tests, which is usually like a coding challenge, that you get to have a look at their skills. But yeah, I think as well, when I'm interviewing somebody, I'm looking for someone who's polite, friendly. For me, a huge red flag is when someone starts talking over me. If they're going to talk over me in the interview, what are they going to treat me like on the team? Yeah, being involved in the interview, like acting like they want to be there, those kinds of things. So that's more, I guess, presentation. Whether it's in person or remote. I think actually I don't think I've conducted any in-person interviews. They've all been remote over the camera. So I think that makes it a little bit easier for both parties, because you're not necessarily sort of worrying about your physical self. You can focus more on the conversation and everything like that.
Yes, that's good that you've brought that up, because I was wondering if you can tell us some tips for remote interviewing. This is something which is maybe fairly new to a lot of people. How can you make sure it goes well?
Yeah, I was thinking about this one before, and I don't know if it changes much. So personally, I would say it's better to dress up smart for it. I know some people these days, like the interviewer and the interviewee will be in a hoodie, like fine. That's usually how software developers look when they're working. But I think it can't hurt to just dress a little smart and feel like you're making an effort. That's my personal opinion, though. Obviously, you're remote, so if you want, you can have the comfy jogger bottoms on, and nobody will know. But yeah, I think for the comfort of both of you, and so that it's not stressful, make sure beforehand that you've got good microphone, good camera, the lighting's okay, the tech's all working, because there's nothing worse than sort of logging into the interview and then your camera doesn't work, or you can't hear them and stuff like that. So I think, yeah, make sure that you've got that all set up beforehand. I've had situations where people have been asked to install Microsoft Teams beforehand, and then they haven't, and it was required for a coding challenge thing. So then it just makes it awkward and stressful that you don't need when you're already stressed. So they're probably my main tips. And then, yeah, just being in a quiet environment, making sure that you don't have sort of like other people walking in and out, or animals and children or anything like that. You just want to be quiet so you can focus, and yeah, just focus on what you're trying to say. One positive that you could do if you really wanted to is they can't see sort of the wall behind the camera, so you could have some post-it notes up with key phrases or acronyms or anything that you wanted to highlight during your interview or have there. You can probably get away with a little sideways glance to read that.
That is a very nice tip. Yeah, I've had times where I've had an interview and then thought, oh no, I didn't mention something, and that would have been really good. But so if you've got something you really want to make sure you mention, post-it note time.
Yeah, obviously post-it notes are a bit old school, so you can just have like your notepad open or whatever text editor you use and just flip between.
Yeah, brilliant. And Jake is wondering, we Google a lot in programming, don't we just? Would it be appropriate to say to the interviewer, if I had the time and could Google things, I would have searched for such and such? Or would it be better to keep that to yourself?
Definitely. I love people who talk to me during live coding sessions. So sometimes it's more like, well, and even not in a live one. So usually if it's not live, you'll be given some sort of challenge to do over the weekend, and then you'll come back together and discuss it afterwards. So during that discussion, you can talk about how you would have approached it differently as well. Although I suppose if you're doing it over the weekend, you've probably used Google already. But say in a live coding session where you have an hour and you're being watched by one or two people, yeah, I think talking about how you would approach this normally, like maybe you would say like, oh, I would look up a third-party package that could do this for me, but I'm going to just do it here now. Anything like that is a win for me. People who can communicate are great to be on the team with, and you know that you can have a good conversation with them and then understand you, and you can understand them. With coding, live coding exercises, they really are horrible, like for everyone involved. But anything you can do to convey what you're thinking to the interviewer is going to help you, because obviously people can't read minds.
Perfect. Interesting to hear that no one on either side is enjoying these tech tests. Because, yeah,
it's just uncomfortable, isn't it? Like, obviously, you know, there's someone who's highly stressed, and they're probably not doing their best work. That's the fact. But yeah, it doesn't have to be a horrible experience.
Yeah. Robert Ramirez wants to know if you have any job search tips. Has LinkedIn helped you to get jobs, for example?
LinkedIn is great. I have a lot of, so I use it as a online CV pretty much, like I said, and so you get recruiters who look for you based off of buzzwords and stuff like that, and you can grow your network. And personally, I keep it to people that I know, so it's quite a small network. But then you still get recruiters that can find you and stuff. So often you'll get a lot of job opportunities in your LinkedIn inbox. So that is a great way to find jobs. Obviously, you might not want to go through a recruiter. You can job search on LinkedIn itself. It's got a job advert section. So there's that. Also, I suppose if you have any people that you know on there, you can reach out and say, hey, is there any jobs going where you're working? Stuff like that. But away from LinkedIn, I don't know. I think the normal job websites, can't think of any now. Like
Indeed, Monster, and stuff like that.
There's usually jobs on there, and it's not finding any jobs.
Brilliant. We talked briefly about recruiters, and Debjit wants to know, do you apply through the company or through a recruiter? Or have you used a mix of both, and do you have a preference?
So I have been a direct applicant, I think, for both of the companies I've ended up working for. But I have worked with a recruiter before, and got through to sort of like final stages, but ultimately chose a different job. So yeah, it can be really nice working with someone who's looking out for looking out for you, trying to find a role that fits for you and stuff. So definitely recruiters can be really, really helpful. That said, sometimes companies are more keen to get direct hires, just because usually if they're using a recruitment firm, there's some kind of overhead cost to them. So definitely applying directly usually is a good way of getting in. So it's kind of up to you. If you want someone to help you and find roles for you so that you don't really have to do much, then recruiters are definitely a great resource. If you're happy to sort of do the research yourself and find companies and send them an email or whatever, then maybe just go it alone.
Perfect. Yeah. Still on the getting a job process, I guess, I was wondering if you've got any advice on tackling the non-technical interview questions, which a lot of people find trickier than the technical ones, because, technical question, you either know it or you don't. There's a right or wrong answer. Non-technical is a different story. What's your take on that?
I don't know. There's such, obviously non-technical, there's such a variety of things that they could ask you. The best thing is to just be honest and friendly, and I don't know, it's too big a question. I mean, maybe say I don't know if you don't know, like I am right now. I failed this question, but
nothing wrong with that. I think I have seen on LinkedIn a practice sheet.
Okay.
Did I imagine that? Huh. No, I didn't imagine it. Here we go. 5 common non-technical interview questions and answers. So things like, why do you want to work for this company? What are your strengths and weaknesses? How do you handle working with non-technical colleagues, and so on? So point being, you can go and research the non-technical questions beforehand and maybe have a few answers up your sleeve. That would be my little tip there.
Yeah, put them on a post-it note.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant. Michael J wants to know what your typical day at work looks like, what sprints look like, and how sprints are developed. Very nice question.
Well, the fun stuff. So I've always worked in places that do that use agile methodologies and Scrum primarily. So that uses sprints, and sprints can be anything from like 1 week up to 2 or maybe even 4 weeks. Where I've worked, it's always been 2 weeks. And as part of Agile and Scrum, there's a lot of different ceremonies, which is a fancy name for meetings that you have to do in order to start the sprint and during it. So as a team, you'll attend all these meetings. You have a sprint planning meeting, which usually happens before the sprint starts. And that's where the team talks about tickets that need to be done in the upcoming sprint. And they will, in an ideal world, use the story points that you've estimated each ticket to fill their sprint up to the sort of like maximum amount of points that you've got for that sprint. And that's usually calculated from something called velocity, which can be, you sort of track how many story points that your team does each sprint, and then you can average that and get a velocity. And that just means that you have a sort of fairly good idea of what you can achieve in each sprint. So that's the sprint planning process. And then during sprint, you might have additional meetings called like backlog refinement, also sometimes known as backlog grooming. And this is just where you would go through any tickets that need attention, whether it is estimating them or maybe expanding on the acceptance criteria or descriptions, any comments that need addressing, any changes that need to happen, stuff like that. And then at the end of your sprint, you typically do a sprint review session where you might do a retrospective where you would talk about the things that went well in the sprint, the things that didn't go so well, and any actions that you can pull out of that. So that the next time you do a sprint, which is immediately afterwards, you can hopefully take on those lessons and sort of apply them to the next sprint. So the idea with sprints is that you're just every sprint improving and tightening up that process, trying to get as efficient as possible, but also that you're delivering value. So the tickets that are in the sprint are ideally things which have a sort of a value at the end of them, so that maybe at the end of a sprint you could do a product release, and yeah, things that sort of will be useful to the customer or the client or whoever is the sort of target audience of your work, that you're providing some value to them. So that's the sprints. I mean, a typical day is then working through those tickets, whether it's bug fixes or new features. Sometimes it's neither. Sometimes you're sort of working on other bits like performance enhancements or helping someone else. Having a coffee, definitely have quite a few of those during the day. And then there's also other aspects of the job too, like designing and sort of future planning. So if you're thinking about an upcoming feature, maybe your product owner or business analyst has got some stuff lined up for you to look at. They might need a bit of technical input. And so that might go to the team. It might go to the lead developer first or a senior developer, but hopefully it should go to the team eventually and they can have a little look and flag any issues that they see with it or any ideas that they have for how it could be better designed to fit in with the system. So that sort of side of it is one of my favorite parts of development, is that thinking about how you're going to do something and the problems around it and everything like that. So yeah.
Great. Sounds very good. Yeah. So I'm not sure actually if you work remotely and if you've always worked remotely, but Jake is wondering, Do you think it's possible to have a remote position at your first tech job?
It's certainly possible. At the moment, there are a lot of remote jobs out there. I would recommend, if you can, to go in the office, especially like in your first role. If you want to, obviously, if you want to work remotely because for you that is the ideal situation, that you don't want to commute, or you have like a young family, or I don't know, you like being in your house, obviously do what you want to do. But I would say, from my point of view, I'm glad that I had the opportunity to work in an office when I was starting out, and be around lots of other software developers, but not only software developers, but also the other people in the business, and that's different levels of management, and just, I don't know, the HR team and the finance team and stuff like that. You meet people, you get a feel of how the company works and how you should work within it. But in terms of the tech side, it's really helpful to be able to roll your chair over to someone else and work with them on a problem. And I made a lot of really great friends from working with people and pairing on issues, or just collaborating in an office. Obviously, yeah, a lot of jobs are sort of remote now, and I have been working remotely since the beginning of COVID pandemic. Pretty much it was a forced thing, but then I took on a remote only job when I moved roles. So you can still get all of that collaboration remotely. You just need to make sure that you're reaching out for it. So don't be afraid to send a message to someone on your team that's more senior than you, and sort of ask for help and ask for a call to go through something. And hopefully there'll be opportunities for you to sort of do team bonding and stuff, either sort of just naturally through the stand-up meetings, or other team meetings, or maybe you can reach out more socially or do like online events and stuff like that. So it's definitely possible, and I know lots of people who have started out their first job remotely and they've done fine. But from my point of view, I'm glad that I did have that experience in an office.
Yes, thank you for sharing your insight there. Debjit and Tony have similar questions, so I'll batch them together. That is, how do you manage and balance your work life? And how do you handle burnout and stay mentally and physically fit?
Great questions. You have to do what feels best for you. Some people can and will work 7 days a week, and they love it, and that's amazing and great to them. Personally, I'm not one of those people. I need my downtime. I need away from screen time. Um, and different jobs and will give you different opportunities, I guess. And the life of a startup founder, for example, you're probably going to be looking at working most days just because of what's involved. A normal 9 to 5 job, hopefully you'd have your evenings and your weekends, but maybe there's some sort of out of hour element there. You might be expected to do overtime on the weekends, or support issues and stuff like that. So I think you can find different roles with varying different levels of sort of downtime or different expectations and stuff. You just have to do what's right for you. I'm currently not in a role because I decided to sort of take a bit of time for my own basically take some actual downtime, because I've been really bad, and in the last couple of years like hardly had any proper time off or really took any breaks and stuff. So I'm just enjoying a bit of time off now. So I think it's really important to just try and listen to what your body's saying to you and how you're feeling and stuff, and do that. But yeah, I think, physically fit, go to the gym, do a sport, I don't know, go for a walk. I think, I really value being physically healthy and going outside and stuff. So just make time for it. It's up to you, but there'll be plenty of people who won't enjoy those kinds of activities and don't need them either. So everyone is different.
Yeah, perfect. I really like the sentiment of listening to your body and your mind and what they're telling you. And if you need a break, for the love of God, take a break. Yes.
Definitely. And there's a bit of like a hustle culture, I know,
Mm.
especially if you're involved on Twitter or sort of like any of those online communities. Everyone's hustling and it's great and it's fun until it isn't. So I think
Yeah.
we're all people, we're not robots. So if you need to have a break, then have a break.
100%. Yes. Miracle has an interesting experience. I got a job offer as a junior front end dev, but after giving me 2 tasks to complete, they didn't call me back. What is the possible cause of this, and how do I get it right next time? Oh, sorry to hear that, Miracle. Yeah.
Yeah, that sucks.
How would you approach this situation, Katy?
Um, Definitely reach out to them and ask for some feedback. If you know, hopefully that they can give you something. It's quite standard, I think, for companies to give feedback. So definitely ask for that because that will give the definite answers to you. If they don't respond, then I would say chalk it up to a good thing that you've missed out on this because they obviously weren't very good anyway. Um, but yeah, don't be disheartened. Just keep applying for roles. Sometimes you don't get it, and just use what you've learned. And so you've done some tech exercises there. So like that again, you just keep continuing to just develop your skills there. So I would treat every job interview as practice for the next one.
Yes, indeed. Also, it might actually be nothing to do with you because a similar thing happened to me once. I thought an interview went really well, and then I didn't hear anything. I was like, oh, that's a bit weird. I didn't even get a no. And then a bit down the line, I found out that there'd been a massive reshuffle in their department and the people that I'd interviewed with had been laid off. So, yeah,
Oh dear.
dodged a massive bullet there.
No, that is so true, and actually, it reminds me. I When I graduated and I was looking for roles, I actually got quite far, like a couple of months into sort of interviewing with a company, and I thought I had it in the bag. And ultimately, they said no because they'd gone for somebody with a PhD, and I didn't have a PhD. So sometimes it's just like, yeah, the candidate pool you're in, or they lose funding for the role, like you just said, or yeah, lots of different
Yeah,
reasons.
yeah, exactly. So, put this experience behind you would be my advice, Miracle, and best of luck for the next one. We're almost up to time, unbelievably. But I think it would be nice to finish with this question, which is how do you find a role which lets you grow?
Yes. I like this question, I'd say. It's a hard one. And I think I said this earlier, but my opinion is getting your foot in the door is the hardest bit. So if you're starting out, I wouldn't worry too much about what the role is. I would go for it and start learning because you will, once you're in a company, you're going to be picking up so many skills so fast. You'll look back a month before or 6 months before and a year, and you won't recognize how like the person that you were then in terms of your skills. You'll have just advanced so much. So get your foot in the door. That's my top tip. Um, and don't be fussy about the industry or really the tech stack used because it's just like the first stepping stone to your journey. You don't have to stay in that industry forever. You can learn other technologies. It's just that like first one. But that said, the things that I would say just to ask about when you're interviewing for these places is firstly around sort of training budget. So do they already have existing resources, maybe a subscription to Pluralsight or Udemy, or would they be willing to provide one? That's something that a lot of companies do provide. I've had it and it's been great because it means that there's anything that I need a bit more sort of solid information on, I can watch a couple hours of training videos or whatever on Udemy or Pluralsight, and so that's a really great resource to have. So I always ask if there's some kind of budget for training. And an extension of that, I guess a little bit less important, but if they take people to conferences or things like that, where there's like learning opportunities and networking opportunities, that's another great thumbs up. And also ask about what progression there is in the business. So you want to see that there are goals that you can hit. When you go in, are you going to go in as a junior? What do they envisage your path looking like to get you to a mid? Or maybe you go in as a mid, what's the path to getting senior? So I think asking about that straight up, maybe they'll turn around and say, oh, well, we don't really do titles. People just join as a software developer and that's where they stay. If you're looking for a role which is going to let you grow your skills and progress through your career, then maybe you don't want to work at that company. Another one that is, I think, so valuable is making sure that they do one-to-one meetings with your manager. So asking, how hands-on are the managers? Are they technical? Are they offering sort of mentorship? Do they do one-to-one meetings regularly? This for me has definitely been one of the biggest reasons why I've done, like, I feel like I've done well in my career, is because I've had the support of managers behind me. I've had regular check-ins. I've been able to talk to them about what my career aspirations are and what I've been finding difficult, what I want to do next, and they've helped me achieve it. So those are sort of like three main things that I would ask about a role, to know that when you like going in that you're going to grow there. And conversely, yeah, the red flags would be sort of like no training budget, no time with your manager, and possibly like a non-technical manager, especially if you're going in. Your managers as you go up the line might become less and less technical, but if you're in a software team and you've got like a team lead who isn't technical, then you're not potentially going to get much mentorship in your role from them. So those would be, yeah, my top things.
Brilliant. Yes, I think that is very valuable advice that can be very helpful to a lot of people throughout their careers. So yeah, what a brilliant way to finish up the stream. Thank you very much for that, Katy. Once again, here is Katy's Twitter. So do head on over there and give Katy a follow. She is always dropping lots of useful advice like this. So
I spend way too much time on Twitter, so come join me.
Go and see all the amazing tips and advice she has over there. And if you like this, we always appreciate a nice little thumbs up and a subscribe. And you may be interested to join Michael and I on Friday. We'll be coding a habit tracker. As you can see, Michael just can't wait to get involved with that. So hope to see you all there. But that's all we have time for now. So I will leave you to code some more, I guess. Thank you very much for coming, Katy. It was brilliant to have you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye.